The sound of dying breath cuts through Montana silence like a blade through leather. Ezra Whitmore drops his water bucket, the metallic clang echoing across his weathered ranch as he spots the motionless figure sprawled near his eastern fence line. Blood pools beneath the stranger, dark against sun-baked earth, while vultures circle overhead like harbingers of death. This discovery will change everything Ezra thought he knew about survival, honor, and the ghosts that haunt the American frontier. The morning had started like any other in the late summer of 1884. Ezra emerged from his cabin as the first rays of sunlight painted the crazy mountains purple and gold. At 52, his body carried the weight of too many battles and too much solitude. His left shoulder ached from an old Confederate bullet, and his hands bore scars from building this ranch with nothing but determination and stubborn pride. The wooden cross marking his wife Sarah's grave caught the early light, a daily reminder of the pneumonia that took her 3 winters past. He had been checking the water troughs when he noticed the ravens. They circled low, their harsh calls disrupting the usual morning symphony of meadowlarks and wind through grass. Something was wrong. Ezra grabbed his Winchester from the cabin and walked toward the disturbance, his boots crunching on frost-covered ground. The figure lay face down, long black hair matted with blood and dirt. Native American, by the look of his clothing and moccasins. Ezra's jaw tightened. He had fought Sioux and Cheyenne during his early ranching years, lost neighbors to raids, buried friends after violent encounters. Every instinct told him to walk away, to let nature take its course. But something made him kneel beside the unconscious man. The stranger was young, maybe 25, with 3 bullet wounds across his back and side. His breathing was shallow, barely perceptible. In his clenched fist, he clutched something wrapped in doeskin. Ezra pried the fingers open and found a small carved eagle, its wings spread wide, made from what looked like sacred white stone. Intricate symbols covered its surface, and tiny turquoise stones formed its eyes. "Damn fool," Ezra muttered, though whether he meant the dying man or himself, he couldn't say. He should leave this stranger to die. Should protect his property and his peace. But Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, gentle words about mercy and second chances that she used to whisper during their evening talks on the porch. Ezra lifted the man carefully, surprised by how light he felt. The stranger groaned once but didn't wake as Ezra carried him toward the cabin. Blood dripped onto the wooden floors that Sarah once kept spotless, but Ezra pressed forward. He laid the man on his own bed and began cleaning the wounds with hot water and whiskey. The bullets had passed through, which was fortunate. Ezra had patched enough soldiers during the war to know fatal wounds from survivable ones. This man might live, if infection didn't take him first. As he worked, Ezra noticed other scars on the stranger's body, old ones that spoke of a hard life and many battles. While bandaging the wounds, Ezra discovered more items hidden in the man's clothing. A piece of birch bark with strange markings, a small pouch of herbs, and a photograph of a white family, torn and faded. The image showed a woman and 2 children, their faces barely visible but somehow familiar. Ezra studied it closely, a memory tugging at the edges of his consciousness. Night fell as Ezra finished his work. The stranger's fever ran high, and he muttered words in a language Ezra didn't understand. The carved eagle sat on the bedside table, seeming to watch over them both with its turquoise eyes. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, their voices carrying across the vast Montana plains like warnings of troubles yet to come. Ezra sat in his chair by the window, Winchester across his lap, watching for signs of pursuit. Whoever had shot this man might come looking. But as hours passed and only silence greeted him, Ezra began to wonder if something else entirely was approaching his isolated ranch. Dawn breaks across the Montana prairie with the sound of labored breathing and whispered prayers. The stranger's eyes open for the first time in 2 days, dark and alert despite his weakened state. Ezra watches from his chair, coffee growing cold in his hands, as the young man struggles to understand where he is. When their gazes meet, both men freeze. This moment will test everything Ezra believes about enemies and allies, while revealing secrets that connect their pasts in ways neither could imagine. The Native American tries to sit up but gasps from pain and collapses back onto the pillow. His hand immediately reaches for his chest, searching for something that isn't there. Panic flashes across his features until he spots the carved eagle on the bedside table. Relief floods his face, followed quickly by suspicion as he studies Ezra with calculating eyes. "Who are you?" the stranger asks in perfect English, his voice hoarse but strong. "Why did you help me?" Ezra sets down his coffee and leans forward slightly. "Name's Ezra Whitmore. This is my ranch. Found you bleeding out by my fence line 3 days ago." He pauses, studying the man's face. "Question is, who are you, and who put those bullets in your back?" The stranger considers this carefully before answering. "I am Joseph Running Bear of the Crow Nation. Those men who shot me, they were bounty hunters hired by Colonel Morrison at Fort Benton. They wanted this." He gestures weakly toward the carved eagle. "It belongs to my people. Morrison stole it during a raid on our sacred grounds last month." Ezra's blood runs cold. He knows Morrison, a ruthless officer who makes his own rules on the frontier. The man has a reputation for taking what he wants and killing anyone who stands in his way. "Morrison's men did this to you over a carved bird?" Joseph's eyes flash with anger despite his weakness. "That eagle is not just carved stone. It holds the spirits of 5 allied tribes, blessed by our medicine men before the treaty talks 20 years ago. Morrison believes it will give him power over our people, make them submit to his will. He is wrong about its magic, but right about its importance to us." "5 tribes?" Ezra asks, a chill running down his spine. "Crow, Blackfeet, Sioux, Cheyenne, and Assiniboine. We were enemies once, but this eagle united us in peace. Morrison's theft has broken something sacred." Joseph tries to sit up again, more successfully this time. "I was chosen to retrieve it because I can move through white settlements without suspicion. My father was a trader who worked with your people. I learned your language, your customs." Ezra stands and walks to the window, processing this information. Outside, the morning sun illuminates the vast grassland that stretches toward the distant mountains. Somewhere out there, Morrison's men might still be hunting for Joseph and the eagle. "How many men were chasing you?" "4 bounty hunters on horseback. They caught me 2 days' ride from here, near Crow Creek. I managed to escape, but they put bullets in me before I could get far." Joseph's voice grows stronger as he speaks. "I sent up smoke signals before I collapsed. Traditional call for Judgment Council." "Judgment Council?" Joseph nods gravely. "When something sacred is involved, when blood has been spilled, the 5 tribes send representatives. They come to witness, to decide what must be done." He looks directly at Ezra. "You have involved yourself in tribal business by saving my life. They will want to see you." Ezra feels the weight of this revelation. He has lived on this land for 15 years, keeping mostly to himself, avoiding the conflicts that rage between settlers and Native Americans. Now he has stumbled into something much larger than a simple rescue. "When will they come?" "Soon." The smoke was seen. "Word travels fast among our people." Joseph struggles to his feet, swaying but determined. "I must return the eagle to its proper place before Morrison realizes where it is. And you, Ezra Whitmore, you must decide what kind of man you truly are." Through the cabin window, dust clouds appear on the northern horizon. Too organized to be wild horses, too many to be Morrison's bounty hunters. Ezra squints against the morning glare and counts at least 20 riders moving slowly but deliberately toward his ranch. His stomach tightens as he realizes what Joseph's smoke signals have summoned. "They're already here," Ezra says quietly. Joseph joins him at the window, his face growing solemn as he watches the approaching riders. Then it begins. They arrive like shadows made flesh, 20 riders from 5 tribes materializing from the Montana morning mist without a sound. Ezra's heart pounds as he watches through his cabin window, Winchester heavy in his hands, while Joseph struggles to dress despite his wounds. The silence stretches across the prairie like a held breath, broken only by the distant snorting of horses and the creak of leather saddles. What happens next will determine whether this day ends in bloodshed or something far more profound. The tribal representatives arranged themselves in a perfect semicircle 50 yards from Ezra's fence line, their horses still as statues carved from stone. Each group displays different tribal markings and dress, but all share the same expression of solemn purpose. In the center sits an elderly Crow woman, her gray hair braided with eagle feathers, her weathered face bearing the authority of countless seasons. To her right, a massive Blackfeet warrior carries a lance decorated with scalps. To her left, a young Sioux brave wears war paint despite the early morning hour. That is Grandmother Singing Hawk, Joseph whispers, pointing to the elderly woman. She speaks for all 5 tribes in matters of the sacred. The others are chiefs and war leaders. They have come to witness your heart, Ezra Whitmore. Ezra feels sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. What exactly does that mean? It means they will watch how you act, how you choose, when faced with difficult decisions. The eagle must be returned to sacred ground, but Morrison's men may come for it. They want to see if you will stand with justice or step aside when trouble arrives. Joseph grips Ezra's shoulder with surprising strength. Your wife, the woman buried by your cabin. What was her name? Sarah, Ezra answers, confused by the question. Joseph nods toward the photograph he had been carrying, now sitting on the cabin table. Sarah Whitmore taught Crow children to read English at the mission school near Fort Benton. She gave them books, treated their illnesses when white doctors would not. My youngest sister was one of her students. Ezra stares at the faded photograph, memory flooding back. Sarah had insisted on teaching at the mission despite his protests about the danger. She would return home with stories about bright children eager to learn, about families struggling to adapt to a changing world. She never told him the names of her students, respecting their privacy, but she spoke often about their courage and dignity. My sister died of scarlet fever the winter before your wife passed, Joseph continues quietly. Sarah held her hand as she died, saying to her in both English and Crow. She said every child deserved to die hearing songs of love, regardless of the color of their skin. The weight of this revelation settles over Ezra like a heavy blanket. Sarah had never mentioned this, had carried the grief of losing students without burdening him with her pain. He thinks of all the evenings she seemed sad, all the times she stared toward the mountains with tears in her eyes. He had assumed she was homesick for Virginia, not mourning children who had become precious to her. A distant rumble of hooves interrupts his thoughts. From the east, another group of riders approaches at full gallop, dust clouds marking their urgent progress. Even from a distance, Ezra can see the military bearing of the lead rider and the distinctive blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers. Morrison has found them. 12 men, Joseph counts, his voice tense. Morrison brings twice what he needs for 2 wounded men. He expects a fight. The tribal representatives remain motionless as the cavalry approaches, but Ezra notices subtle changes in their positioning. Hands drift toward weapons, horses shift slightly to provide better angles for potential combat. The elderly woman, Grandmother Singing Hawk, raises one weathered hand, and the entire group falls into complete silence. Morrison reins in his horse just outside Ezra's property line, his cold blue eyes surveying the scene with calculated intelligence. He is a tall man with steel gray hair and a mustache that fails to soften his harsh features. 2 sergeants flank him while 9 additional soldiers spread out in a loose formation behind them. Well, Morrison calls out, his voice carrying easily across the morning air. Ezra Whitmore, isn't it? Heard you might be harboring a thief and a stolen artifact belonging to the United States Army. His gaze shifts to the silent tribal representatives. And I see we have ourselves quite the gathering. Makes me wonder what kind of business a simple rancher has with hostile Indians. Ezra steps onto his porch, Joseph beside him despite his wounds. The carved eagle sits heavy in Joseph's hand, its turquoise eyes catching the morning sunlight. Between them stands a choice that will define not just this moment, but everything that follows. The moment hangs in the Montana air like lightning waiting to strike. Ezra stands on his porch, feeling the weight of 20 tribal warriors, 12 cavalry soldiers, and 1 dying man's trust pressing down on his shoulders. Morrison's cold smile promises violence while Grandmother Singing Hawk's ancient eyes demand truth. In his weathered hands, Ezra holds the choice that will define everything Sarah taught him about courage, mercy, and standing for what matters when the whole world is watching. Morrison dismounts slowly, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "I'll make this simple, Whitmore. That savage beside you stole government property. Hand him over along with what he took, and we'll pretend this little gathering never happened." His eyes narrow as he surveys the silent tribal representatives. "Otherwise, I might start wondering if you're in league with hostiles planning an uprising." "That eagle never belonged to you, Morrison," Ezra replies, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Joseph here tells me you raided sacred ground to steal it. Last I checked, that kind of grave robbing wasn't legal, even for army officers." Morrison's face darkens. "You're walking a dangerous line, rancher. I have authority to pursue stolen property and deal with anyone who interferes." He signals his men, who spread out further, weapons ready. "This is your last chance to step aside." Joseph steps forward despite his wounds, the carved eagle held high for all to see. "This sacred stone was blessed by 5 tribes 20 years ago as a symbol of peace between our peoples. Your theft of it dishonors not just Native Americans, but every treaty your government ever signed." His voice carries across the prairie, strong and clear. "I return it now to where it belongs." With great ceremony, Joseph walks toward Grandmother Singing Hawk. Each step costs him visible effort, blood seeping through his bandages, but his purpose never wavers. The elderly woman dismounts and meets him halfway, her weathered hands accepting the eagle with reverence that speaks of generations of tradition. Morrison draws his pistol. "That's far enough. Nobody moves until I get that artifact back." Ezra feels Sarah's presence as surely as if she stood beside him on the porch. He remembers her gentle voice describing the children she taught, their eagerness to learn, their dignity in the face of hardship. He thinks of the photograph Joseph carried, evidence of connections that transcended race and prejudice. In that moment, 15 years of grief and isolation fall away, replaced by clarity as sharp as winter wind. "You want that eagle, Morrison?" Ezra calls out, stepping off his porch and walking slowly toward the confrontation. "You'll have to go through me first." The 20 tribal warriors remain motionless, but Ezra feels their attention focus on him like sunlight through a magnifying glass. This is the test Joseph spoke of, the moment when his character will be weighed and measured. Morrison's soldiers shift nervously, outnumbered and surrounded by hostile territory. "You're making a mistake, Whitmore," Morrison snarls, his pistol trained on Ezra's chest. "One old rancher can't stand against the United States Army." "Maybe not," Ezra admits, stopping just 10 feet from Morrison's horse. "But I'm not standing alone anymore." Grandmother Singing Hawk raises the eagle toward the morning sky, speaking words in Crow that roll across the prairie like distant thunder. One by one, the other tribal representatives join their voices to hers, creating a harmony that seems to make the very earth vibrate with ancient power. Morrison's horse shies nervously, and several of his soldiers look around with growing unease. The sound of approaching hooves interrupts the ceremony. From the south, a new group of riders appears, territorial marshals with federal authority that supersedes Morrison's military jurisdiction. Joseph's smoke signals had called more than just tribal representatives. They had summoned witnesses, lawmen, and justice. As the marshals surround Morrison's confused soldiers, Grandmother Singing Hawk approaches Ezra. She places one weathered hand on his shoulder and speaks in careful English. "Sarah's husband has honor. The 5 tribes remember this day. You are welcome at our fires always." 3 months later, Ezra stands before Sarah's grave as autumn colors paint the crazy mountains gold and red. The wooden cross bears fresh flowers, but it no longer stands alone. Beside it, a small stone marker honors the Native American children Sarah taught, including Joseph's sister. The carved eagle rests permanently at the mission school, a symbol of the bridges his wife helped build between 2 worlds. Morrison was court-martialed for theft and conduct unbecoming an officer. Joseph recovered fully and now serves as a translator and peace negotiator between tribes and territorial government. And Ezra's lonely ranch has become a stopping point for travelers of all backgrounds, a place where Sarah's legacy of compassion continues to grow. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. What other untold stories from the American frontier would you like to see explored? Hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly historical dramas that bring forgotten heroes back to life. Until next time, remember that courage often looks like an ordinary person making an extraordinary choice when it matters most. Tentar novamente o Claude pod cometer eros. Confira semper as respostas, pesquisa sonnet 4.